The Circle and the Fire. By Clifton Andrew Mather. Copyright 2020. Chapter 1. The Fire. A T. The Rim of the Earth. The first reports came at dawn. A single rider burst through the gates of Highcrest, his horse lathered, his cloak scorched at the edges. He collapsed before the steps of the twin thrones, gasping words that chilled the hall more than winter ever could. The fire. It does not die. It does not stop. It devours everything. High King Haldan Rook rose from his throne, his voice steady. Speak plainly, soldier. The rider lifted trembling eyes. My king, the rim of the earth is burning, and the fire is moving inward. A silence fell so heavy, it felt like a weight on the chest. High King Corvin Ashmark, younger but no less resolute, stepped forward. How far has it spread? Farther than any fire should. It leaps oceans, it climbs stone, it leaves no ash, only nothing. The hall stirred with fear, but Haldan's voice cut through it. Send for the circle. The circle of 7 gathers. Within the hour, the 5 companions stood before the 2 high kings. Sir Garrick Thorn, the unshakable. Sir Jareth Stonehelm, the disciplined. Sir Dorian Ashford, the sharp-minded. Sir Fenric Stormwell, the swift. Sir Eldrin Frostwood, the spiritual. They formed a half-circle around their kings, as they had done since the day they swore their oaths. Haldan looked at them with the weight of a man who loved them like brothers. Riders have returned from the east. The fire is real, Corvin added, and it is coming for all of us. Fenric exhaled slowly. Then the world is ending. No, Haldan said. Not while we still stand. Garrick stepped forward. What is your command, my kings? Haldan exchanged a long, wordless look with Corvin, the kind only brothers could share. We ride east, Haldan said. We find the truth, Corvin finished. Eldrin bowed his head. Then the circle rides as one, the riders warning. By midday, more riders arrived, burned, exhausted, hollow-eyed. One collapsed into Jareth's arms, the fire. It swallowed the eastern plains. It moves like a living thing. Dorian knelt beside him. What feeds it? Nothing. It needs nothing. It simply is. Haldan's jaw tightened. How long before it reaches Highcrest? The rider's voice cracked. Weeks, perhaps days. Corvin turned to the circle. Then we have no time. The decision. That night, the 7 met alone in the war chamber. Maps lay scattered across the table, marked with blackened lines where the fire had already passed. Dorian tapped the center of the map. The Library of History, the oldest records in the world. If there is any answer, it lies there. Jareth frowned. It sits in the heart of the fallen empire. We would need an army. Haldan nodded. Then we take one. Corvin placed his hand on the table. 30,000 knights, the greatest host Highcrest has ever sent. Garrick looked between the 2 kings. If we march, we may not return. Haldan's voice softened. If we stay, the world will not return. Eldrin closed his eyes. Then the path is chosen. Fenric grinned faintly. When do we ride? Corvin smiled back. At dawn. The brotherhood moment. Before they parted for the night, the 7 stood together in the torchlight. Haldan placed a hand on Corvin's shoulder. Brother, whatever comes, we face it together. Corvin nodded. As we always have. Garrick stepped forward. And not just you 2. All 7 of us. Jareth added. One circle. One purpose? Dorian smirked. One very foolish plan. Fenric laughed. The best kind. Eldrin looked at each of them, eyes steady. Then let our hearts be unshaken. For the world may burn, but we will not falter. Haldan lifted his ringed hand. To the circle of 7. They raised their hands together, rings glinting like stars in the dim hall. Corvin whispered, May we find the truth before the fire finds us. Chapter 2. The March of 30,000. The gates of Highcrest opened at dawn. 30,000 knights stood in formation, armor gleaming like a sea of steel beneath the rising sun. Banners snapped in the cold wind. The crest of Highcrest, the sigil of the circle, the colors of every house that had sworn loyalty to the two High Kings. High King Haldan Rook rode at the front, his expression carved from stone. High King Corvin Ashmark rode beside him, younger, sharper, eyes burning with resolve. Behind them rode the 5 companions, Garrick, Jareth, Dorian, Fenric and Eldrin, forming the living shield around their kings. As the host began to move, Corvin leaned toward Haldan. "Brother, do you ever fear what lies ahead?" Haldan didn't look away from the horizon. "I fear nothing except failing the men who ride behind us." Corvin smiled faintly. "Then we fear the same thing." Garrick rode up beside them. "If fear comes, my kings, let it come to me first. I'll wrestle it into the dirt." Fenric laughed. "You'd wrestle the fire itself if it had arms." "It doesn't need arms," Garrick replied. "I'll still win." Even Haldan cracked a smile. Eldrin's voice was quiet but steady. "Let your hearts be strong. The world may tremble, but the circle does not." The first sight of the fire. By the 3rd day, the land began to change. Grass turned brittle. Streams ran warm. Animals fled westward in frantic herds. Then, at sunset, they saw it, a line of red on the far horizon, not flickering like normal fire, but glowing like a wound in the world. Corvin whispered, "It's worse than the riders said." Dorian studied the horizon. "It moves without wind. It climbs without fuel. It devours without ash." Jareth tightened his grip on his reins. "Then we ride faster." Haldan raised his voice so the entire front ranks could hear. "Knights of Highcrest, the fire approaches. But we do not flee. We ride toward the truth." A roar rose from the host, 30,000 voices strong, the fallen empire. On the 7th day the ruins of the fallen empire rose before them, black towers, shattered walls and a fortress that had once ruled half the world. And guarding it were the remnants of the old empire's soldiers, thousands of them, armored in rusted iron, desperate and afraid. Their commander stepped forward. "Turn back! The fire is coming! There is no salvation here!" Haldan rode forward. "We seek the library of history." The commander shook his head. "Then you seek death." Corvin's voice hardened. "We seek truth. Stand aside." The commander hesitated, then raised his sword. "Then you will take it by force." The battle at the gates. The clash was thunder. Steel met steel. Shields splintered. Arrows darkened the sky. The circle of 7 fought at the front, carving a path through the chaos. Garrick smashed through enemy lines like a living battering ram. Jareth fought with disciplined precision, every strike measured. Fenric moved like lightning, weaving between foes. Dorian directed the knights with sharp commands, turning the tide. Eldrin fought quietly, steadily, his presence calming the men around him. Haldan and Corvin fought back to back, their swords rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Corvin shouted over the roar, "Brother, on your left!" Haldan turned, cutting down an attacker. "I see him. You're getting slow. And you're getting loud." They laughed, even in the heart of battle. At last the gates fell. The defenders scattered. The path to the Library of History lay open. The Library of History. The library was a vast stone hall, its walls lined with shelves that reached into darkness. Scrolls, tablets, tomes, the knowledge of ages. The 7 entered together, torches in hand. Dorian whispered, "If the answer exists, it must be here." They searched for hours. History, science, philosophy, religion, every discipline, every theory, every explanation. But nothing spoke of a fire that devoured the world. Corvin slammed a book shut. There must be something. Haldan placed a hand on his shoulder. "We will find it." Eldrin's voice echoed softly. "Or, it will find us." The secret door. It was Fenric who found it. A thin seam in the stone behind a collapsed shelf. "Here!" he called. Together, they pushed the stone aside. Behind it, lay a small chamber, and inside, on a pedestal of black marble, sat a single book, a leather-bound volume. Old, untouched, preserved as if by purpose. Halden lifted it gently. The title was clear: The Holy Bible, King James Version. The seven stared in silence. Corvin whispered, "Why would this be hidden?" Eldrin answered, "Because truth is often hidden until the moment it is needed." Halden opened it. They read, and as they read, something stirred in their hearts, something deeper than fear, deeper than duty, deeper than the fire itself. Hope. Not for this world, but for the next. Chapter 3. The Words That Awakened a Kingdom. The march back to Highcrest was nothing like the march out. 30,000 knights had left the kingdom with steel in their hearts. 30,000 returned with something far heavier, the truth. The unquenchable fire had grown. The sky behind them glowed red even at night. The air tasted of smoke and endings. But the circle of seven rode at the front, and in Halden's hands he carried the book that had changed everything. The King James Bible. Corvin rode beside him, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Brother, when we left I thought we were seeking a way to stop the fire." Halden nodded. "So did I. And now?" Halden looked down at the book. "Now I know the fire is not the enemy. Death is not the enemy. Ignorance is—" Eldrin, riding just behind them, spoke softly. "We were searching for a way to save the world. Instead, we found the way to save souls." Garrick grunted. "I'd still prefer a way to punch the fire in the face." Fenric laughed. "If anyone could, it'd be you." Dorian shook his head. "This is bigger than fists, Garrick." Jareth added, "Bigger than swords, bigger than kings." Corvin looked at the five companions, his brothers in all but blood. "Then we must speak to the people, all of them." Halden nodded. "Tonight, the gathering of the kingdom. By nightfall, the entire kingdom of Highcrest gathered in the great square. Families, soldiers, elders, children, all stood beneath the darkening sky, the glow of the distant fire painting the clouds red. Halden stepped forward, the Bible in his hands. Corvin stood beside him. The five companions formed a line behind them, a living wall of loyalty. Halden raised his voice. "People of Highcrest, we rode to the edge of the world, seeking a way to stop the fire. We found none." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Corvin lifted his hand. "But we found something greater." Halden opened the book. "The truth," he read aloud. Not long passages, but the words that had pierced their hearts. Verses of hope, verses of salvation, verses of eternal life. The crowd listened in silence. Eldrin stepped forward. "This world will burn, but your souls do not have to." Dorian added, "We searched every discipline, history, science, philosophy, and none held the answer." Jareth's voice was steady. "But this book does." Garrick crossed his arms. "And if I can trust it—" "Anyone can." Fenric grinned. "He's right." Corvin looked out over the people. "We cannot stop the fire, but we can prepare for what comes after." Halden closed the book gently. "Give your life to Jesus. Place your hope not in this world, but in the next." A hush fell. Then a single voice cried out, "I will." Another, then dozens, then hundreds. People fell to their knees, families prayed together, soldiers bowed their heads. The kingdom trembled, not with fear, but with awakening. The circle alone. Later that night, after the crowds dispersed, the seven gathered on the balcony overlooking the city. The fire on the horizon was closer now, a red wall creeping across the land. Corvin leaned on the railing. "Do you think we did enough?" Halden stood beside him. "We gave them the truth. The rest is between them and God." Garrick sat on a stone bench, sharpening his sword out of habit. "Strange. I fought 1,000 battles. But this one, I can't swing at—" Jareth nodded. "This is not a battle of steel," Dorian added. "Nor of strategy." Fenric looked up at the sky. "It's a battle of the heart." Eldrin placed a hand on Halden's shoulder. "And the hearts of this kingdom are turning. Halden exhaled slowly. Then our task is nearly done. Corvin looked at him. Nearly? Halden met his brother's eyes. We stand with them until the end. Corvin smiled. Then we stand together. The 5 companions stepped forward, forming a circle around the 2 kings. Garrick, to the last breath. Jareth, to the last moment. Dorian, to the last truth. Fenric, to the last heartbeat. Eldrin, to the last soul. Halden raised the Bible. Corvin placed his hand on his brother's shoulder. The Circle of 7, Halden said, will not abandon its people. And we will not fear the fire, Corvin added. The flames on the horizon brightened. The wind carried the scent of smoke. The end was coming, but the 7 stood unshaken. Chapter 4. The Last Hours of Highcrest. The fire reached the outer borders of the kingdom at dawn. Not flames yet, but heat. A wave of it rolled across the plains like the breath of some vast unseen beast. Grass wilted. Rivers steamed. The sky glowed red even before the sun rose. High King Halden Rook stood on the eastern wall, watching the horizon burn. High King Corvin Ashmark joined him, cloak whipping in the hot wind. It's close, Corvin said quietly. Halden nodded. Closer than we hoped. Behind them, the 5 companions approached. Garrick, Jareth, Dorian, Fenric, and Eldrin, the Circle of 7 gathering without a word. Garrick wiped sweat from his brow. Feels like the fire's breathing on us already. Fenric tried to smile. If it starts talking, I'm running. Jareth shook his head. There is nowhere left to run. Eldrin looked at the horizon with calm eyes. Then we stand. Halden turned to them. Brothers, today we prepare the people. Tonight, we stand with them. Corvin added, and whatever comes, we face it together. The 5 nodded. No hesitation, no fear. The kingdom awakens. The 7 walked through the streets of Highcrest, and everywhere they went, people gathered around them. Families, soldiers, elders, children. Some cried, some prayed, some simply stared at the kings with trembling hope. Halden lifted the Bible so all could see. Listen to me, he said, voice steady despite the trembling earth. The fire cannot be stopped, but your souls can be saved. Corvin stepped beside him. Give your life to Jesus. Trust him. Follow him. This world is ending, but the next is eternal. A woman stepped forward, clutching her child. My kings, is there truly hope? Eldrin knelt beside her. There is hope beyond anything this world can burn, Dorian added. We searched every discipline, every scroll, every ancient record. Only this book held the truth. Jareth placed a hand on a soldier's shoulder. Courage is not surviving the fire. Courage is choosing faith before it comes. Garrick crossed his arms. And if a stubborn fool like me can believe, anyone can. Fenric grinned. He's right. Miracles do happen. People began to kneel. Hundreds. Then thousands. The streets filled with prayer, with tears, with voices calling out to Jesus. The 7 stood among them, not above them, but with them. The fire draws near. By midday, the heat became unbearable. The sky turned orange, birds fell from the air, the ground cracked beneath their feet. Corvin wiped sweat from his brow. Brother, it's almost here. Halden nodded. Then we gather everyone in the square. The bells rang, deep, solemn, echoing across the kingdom. The entire population of Highcrest gathered in the great square, the same place where they had first heard the truth. Halden stood before them, Bible in hand. Corvin stood beside him. The 5 companions formed a line behind them, the living symbol of unity. Halden raised his voice. People of Highcrest, the fire comes, but we do not face it alone, Corvin continued. We face it with faith, with hope, with Jesus. A murmur of prayer swept through the crowd. Eldrin stepped forward. Let your hearts be unshaken, for the fire can take your breath, but not your soul, Jareth added. Stand firm. Stand together. Dorian looked out over the people. This is not the end. It is the beginning. Fenric lifted his chin. And we face it as one kingdom. Garrick slammed his fist against his chest. As one family. The crowd roared in agreement. The circle of 7 alone. As the people prayed, the 7 stepped aside for a moment. Just a few steps. Just enough to speak privately. The heat was now a constant pressure, like a giant hand pressing down on the world. Corvin looked at Halden. Brother, if this is our last hour. Halden placed a hand on his shoulder. Then I am grateful to spend it with you. Corvin's voice cracked. I could not have asked for a better brother. Halden smiled softly. Nor I. Garrick stepped forward. If this is it, I want you all to know something. Fenric smirked. If you say you love us, I'm jumping into the fire myself. Garrick glared. I wasn't going to say that. Jareth folded his arms. Then what were you going to say? Garrick sighed. Fine, I love you idiots. The group laughed, even as the ground trembled beneath them. Dorian wiped his eyes. I never thought the end of the world would feel like this. Eldrin placed a hand on each of their shoulders. It feels like peace. Because we know where we're going. Halden looked at each of them. His brothers, his companions, his circle. Whatever happens, we face it together. Corvin nodded. Together. The 5 companions echoed softly. Together. The flames appear. A roar rose from the horizon, deep, thunderous, like the earth itself crying out. The fire appeared over the hills, a wall of living flame stretching across the world. People screamed. Children clung to their parents. Soldiers dropped to their knees. Halden lifted the Bible high. Do not fear. Lift your eyes to heaven. Corvin shouted. This is not the end. This is the doorway. The 7 stood at the front of the crowd, shoulder to shoulder, unshaken. The fire rushed toward them. The heat became blinding. The world turned white. And the circle of 7 stood firm. Chapter 5. When the sky turned to fire. The first flames touched the outer fields at dusk. Not sparks, not embers. A wall of living fire stretching across the horizon, swallowing the world as it came. The heat struck Highcrest like a hammer. Windows cracked, stones groaned, the air shimmered with unbearable pressure. High King Halden Rook stood at the front of the great square, Bible in hand, sweat rolling down his brow. High King Corvin Ashmark stood beside him, cloak whipping in the furnace wind. Behind them the 5 companions formed a line, Garrick, Jareth, Dorian, Fenric, Eldrin, the circle of 7 standing as one. The people of Highcrest filled the square, thousands upon thousands, praying, crying, holding one another as the fire approached. Halden raised his voice above the roar. People of Highcrest, do not fear what destroys the body, fear only losing your soul. Corvin added, lift your hearts to Jesus. He is the way, he is the truth, he is the life. A wave of prayer swept through the crowd. The fire reaches the walls. A thunderous crack split the air as the fire struck the outer wall. Stone exploded. Heat blasted through the streets. Children screamed. Soldiers shielded their families with their own bodies. Garrick stepped forward, planting his feet. If that fire wants us, it'll have to go through me. Fenric coughed through the heat. Garrick, it's fire. You can't punch fire, Garrick growled. I can try. Even Halden smiled at that. Jareth's voice was steady. Stand firm. This is the hour we were born for. Dorian wiped sweat from his eyes. I always thought I'd die in battle, not whatever this is. Eldrin placed a hand on his shoulder. This is not death. This is passing. Corvin looked at Eldrin. You speak as though you see something we do not. Eldrin nodded. I see peace. The last words to the people. Halden lifted the Bible again, though the heat made his hands tremble. People of Highcrest, the fire cannot take what you have given to Jesus, Corvin shouted. Do not cling to this world. Cling to him. A man in the crowd cried out, My kings! Will we see you again in the next life? Halden's voice softened. Yes. If you have given your life to him, you will. A woman sobbed. I'm afraid. Eldrin stepped forward. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing faith, in spite of it. Garrick raised his sword. And we choose faith. Jareth nodded. All of us, Fenric added. Together, Dorian whispered. Always. The crowd echoed their words, voices rising like a final hymn. The circle of 7 alone. The fire was now only a few streets away, devouring everything in its path. The heat was blinding. The air was almost too thick to breathe. Halden turned to his brother. Corvin, if this is our last moment, Corvin stepped closer, gripping his brother's arm, then I am honored to spend it with you. Halden's voice cracked. You were the best brother I could have asked for, Corvin smiled through tears. And you were the best king. They embraced, not as rulers, but as brothers. Garrick cleared his throat, loudly. If you two start crying, I'm going to lose it, Fenric elbowed him. You already lost it years ago. Jareth shook his head. Let them have their moment. Dorian's voice trembled. We all should. Eldrin stepped into the center of the circle. Brothers, take each other's hands. They did. All 7. A perfect circle. Halden whispered. We began together. Corvin answered. We end together. Garrick, to the last breath. Jareth, to the last heartbeat. Dorian, to the last truth. Fenric, to the last step. Eldrin, to the last soul. Halden closed his eyes. Jesus, receive us. The flames arrive. The fire roared into the square like a living storm. People cried out, not in terror, but in prayer. The circle of 7 stood unmoving, hands clasped, heads bowed. The flames rose around them. The heat became light. The world dissolved into white. And then silence.